Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this public hearing to order. For those of you, I'm sure most of you have been to public hearings before and public meetings and so on. We have it set up so that if you have to say something, want to ask a question, make a comment, please go to the microphone in the center and identify yourself. And if you want to tell us where you live, not the street number necessarily, but West Harpswell, Wars Island, that type of thing, that would be nice too. My name is Al LaGrow. I'm the chair of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force. The folks sitting up here are members of the task force. We have a couple that are not here today for a variety of reasons. And one of our members, astute and esteemed members, is sitting over there in the ball cap. So I want to thank them all for showing up as well and invite them to comment as they see fit, answer questions. We'll do it as informally as possible, but try to move this along so that we can all enjoy this beautiful day today in Harpswell. This has been a long effort for the town and for members of the task force. In November, when hopefully this is going to be voted on, it will literally be 4 years since this process was started. A request by the select board kicked it off as a means of updating the 2005 comprehensive plan, which was the last time a plan was done in Harpswell. The purpose today is really for you to give you an opportunity to ask questions, clarify things, and then we're going to take feedback from this meeting, combine it with feedback that we've received from 4 other meetings that we had during the summer. One at Cundy's Harbor, one to the non-resident taxpayers on July 7th. July 8th, we met at Wars Island Schoolhouse to get their views on the comprehensive plan, and then we met at Kellogg Church on the 22nd of July. So it's been a busy summer. We've got a lot of good insight and information. We have taken action and done a number of things to hopefully make this plan more palatable for everybody in the town while not compromising in the important things that we think are part of this plan. I'd like to remind everybody, as I do most of the times that I talk to folks, that this is not just about one particular issue. There are 13 different things that are addressed in this comprehensive plan. Water is very important. Transportation, the economy, the marine economy, marine resources, natural resources, housing. Some of these subject areas are required by the state in order to have a comprehensive plan. Housing, for example, some people have asked me, why do you even have to talk about housing? Because it's a requirement that the state puts on municipalities in order for them to submit a comprehensive plan and have it certified. So that's why we're addressing it. There are other reasons as well. But again, I'd like people to keep in mind that this is a significant effort covering a lot of different topics here in the town. It is not a regulatory document. By that I mean, the fact that you see it in the plan doesn't mean it's going to happen by law or anything like that. These are suggestions in order to achieve what the town has put together as its vision for the next 10 or 15 years. So keep that in mind as well. At some of the meetings we've had before, I've talked about why we have this plan. Not only has it been a long time since the town has had it, but there are very tangible reasons why we should have a plan, I believe. First of all, the state has earmarked $80 million, I should say, for municipalities to tap into that have comprehensive plans. And they cover a variety of different topics. Housing and infrastructure, the environment, and several other things. There are also 25 grant and loan programs that are funded by this particular piece of money. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that if we can, as a community, put this together, it gives us more flexibility financially to address a number of things in the future. The other reason, of course, is a little bit more aspirational, I should say, and that is that if we can agree as a town on a comprehensive plan, a vision for the future, that will go a long way to unify various parts of the plan. Everybody sitting here probably has a priority list in their mind in terms of what they think is the most important thing in the town. Not everybody's going to agree on that, but if we can agree that these collectively are important things that we need to address, then that puts us a long way toward making progress in the future. Now, we've done a number of different and specific things since the town meeting was canceled last March. There are copies of this plan available that we've made showing some of the edits that we've made as you look through. I think two of the most significant things we've done is take out two goals that, upon reflection, were somewhat problematic. The first goal was goal number 4 in the housing section. We removed that because essentially what it said was that we should try to limit the transformation of long-term rental and other properties into short-term rental properties. And the more we thought about that, and the more people we talked to, it was almost like we were trying to solve one problem, housing, or take a bite out of it, by creating another problem that people felt was important. A lot of people supplement their incomes by taking care of short-term rentals in the summertime and other times. And sometimes it's the bulk of their income. So we decided to remove that to eliminate that conflict. The next thing we removed was goal number 7 in the housing section, in the land use section. And did I get that backwards? Okay. Okay, yeah. When a person would look at that and say, well, we want to expand the opportunities for affordable or attainable housing, why are you taking out goal 7 in this particular area? Because we've already addressed that in other parts of the plan, so we felt it was redundant to include that, and so we could take it out without losing what we really wanted to convey about housing and affordable, attainable housing in particular. We've done a number of other things. We've taken, we've edited certain sections of the plan to make it less directive and more prescriptive. In other words, instead of saying revise, we changed it to consider revising, things like that. Things that you might not think about as you go through it, but in terms of tone, it makes a difference. And again, this is not a document that is regulatory, it's more prescriptive, it's more identifying the goals for our future and recommendations that go with them. By far, the most controversial areas that we've talked about, discussed with people in the community have dealt with housing and land use. Obviously, they go hand in hand. But I want to reiterate again, we had to address housing in this town. Not only because it's required by the state, but also for a lot of people, it is a significant problem. How to afford to live here. People in certain social strata, if you will, have a difficult time finding a place that they can afford to live in town. I'm not doctors, we nurses, teachers, tradesmen, and sternmen on lobster boats even. So there are a lot of people that it would be nice to have as part of the community here, but simply can't afford it. So the Affordable Housing Working Group, all of you have heard about that. The report we've made available here today was put together at the request of the Select Board. They worked for about 2 years. They came up with a number of recommendations. And their report, as I say, is available here today and also is available online by going to the town website. Now, like any other document, some people were concerned that by referencing that report, we supported everything in it. That's not necessarily true. We did not specify, for example, in the comp plan, or at one time we did, but we subsequently took it out, housing at Mitchell Field and Downey Point. That's not a part of the comp plan. On the other hand, the Affordable Housing Working Group was charged by the Select Board to assess the feasibility of putting housing in those areas. That's a separate matter. It's now, I think, under the Housing Committee for them to deal with as their own separate committee. But we have not included it directly in our comp plan. One final thing, growth areas in the town. The state would like municipalities submitting a comprehensive plan to specify growth areas in the town. That is, areas where concentrated growth will occur over the next 10 or 15 years. We decided not to do that. And in order for us to have the state to approve that, we have to submit a letter when we put the plan into the state explaining the rationale for not having growth areas in the town. And it's fairly straightforward. We have well water, fractured rock. There's no big aquifer. There are fractured rock aquifers all over the town, but there are no guarantees that a specific area of the town, if you fence it off or designate it, is going to be able to support growth for the next 10 or 15 years. It made more sense for us, or to us, to say if growth does occur in the town, it should somehow be distributed throughout the town so that no one area bears the burden or potential cost in terms of water and other things for the growth that the town might incur in the next 10 or 15 years. So that's going to be explained in a letter that will accompany the comprehensive plan when it's submitted to the state for their certification and approval. First, we have to hear what you have to say today, complete our document review, come up with smooth copies that are going to be available, I would guess 2 months before November 4th, when you will have the opportunity to vote on this as in secret ballot, along with the November 4 elections. So we're not going to have a hand vote on this particular document. It's going to be a secret ballot in conjunction with the other elections that are going on in November. So that gives people an opportunity to look over a smooth copy of the plan. We're going to have them available at the town office, the libraries. I think we're going to put one in Curtis Library as well. I think we've done that in the past. And other places that we think are well attended, if you will, in the town. And then finally, it's going to be online as it is and has been for quite a while. So that's all I have to say. Does anybody else want to chime in or add something? Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to you folks now to ask you if you have any questions or any comments that we can make note of, that we can come back and take a look at what we have to do to Yes, ma'am.
Courtney Snellings, Morris Island. Is this working? I hate these things. Courtney Snellings. Oh, gracious. Wonderful. Those who know me know that this is the absolute last place I like to be, is in front of a microphone. But I have things to say that I think are important, so I want to share them. One is that I would like to thank the task force, who've had an untenable job. Everybody doesn't agree, as is the case with any committee, but we owe them our respect because they have all worked hard on trying to come up with something that is at least palatable to everyone. We don't all have the same thoughts. Was a member of the Affordable Housing Working Group, the terribly vilified group that was appointed by the select board. We worked so hard, talked to people, did surveys, whatever. You can read about it. At one time, did we recommend housing on Mitchell Field and Dowdy Point? Yes, we did. Part of that came from the fact the town owned the lands, and the two Mitchell Field master plans called for looking at cluster housing on Mitchell Field. So it seemed to make sense. We heard people's feedback. And so this is the only reference in our report, Housing for Harpswell. I'm going to read it. This is under associated recommendations. At the select board's behest, assess the viability of portions of Mitchell Field and town-owned land on Dowdy Point Road as possible locations for planned attainable housing developments in the future. If development is feasible, consider establishing tax increment financing districts as needed. That is it. We kicked the can down the road. If a future select board wants to do something and then bring it to town meeting, sure. But people who think that just because the report might be referred to in the comp plan, that's all it says. That's it. So, please, I think the comp plan folks in their inventories have tried to touch every aspect as best they can. Obviously, aspects are related. Housing is connected to land use, is connected to the waterfront. If people can't afford to live here, forget that. I talked to fishermen who said, my kids can't live here. Or, I had a starman, but he's not coming anymore because he can't find a place to live. He doesn't want to drive from wherever. So please, please consider these things. You're not going to like everything, probably, that's in the comp plan. That's the way things work. But please look at the bulk of it. I think you will find that it has a lot of good things that have been suggested. Thank you very much.
Don't be shy. We're not going to ask you to sing. Or even tap dance. So I can assume everybody is fairly satisfied with what they know about the plan. Okay.
Hi, Sean Rell, Harbor, and I'm actually, you have to talk right into it. Okay. Sean Rell, County Harbor. I'm actually the chair of the Housing Committee, and I feel that the current document does not adequately communicate the importance of this issue in town. I think that the removal of reference to the Affordable Housing Working Group's report, with that paragraph missing from the housing section, is an inadequate expression of that need in town. That's what I will say around that. Let's see.
Can you read the paragraph? You haven't, I'm just curious. Would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the change to paragraph goes saying, the town recognizes the need for attainable housing in Harpswell and is committed to exploring options to create housing that will attract and retain people, among whom are young families, waterfront workers, firefighters, teachers, and tradespeople. In addition, the town will actively seek opportunities to enable older adults to stay in the community. Concerns regarding the housing situation prompted the select board to appoint an affordable housing working group to gather data and recommend possible solutions. That's where the paragraph ends now. That is an explanation of problems and aspirations, but it does not, in my opinion, adequately communicate the language of the town recognizes the need and is committed to exploring options, does not do enough, in my opinion, to drive that point. It reads as an incredibly a passing mention, in my opinion, and yeah.
Just if I could interrupt you for a second, Sean, the Affordable Housing Working Group report is also mentioned in the executive summary up front, and it also appears on a list with other documents, reports that the town has approved in the past, things like the Mitchell Field Master Plan, Open Space Plan, Harbor and Waterfront Plan. It's in there with a description of what that basically entailed. So it's not like it's been erased.
Yeah,
It's there.
Yep. I do want to say, like, this particular mention of the working group's report is included in the housing section by the request of comp plan members to increase transparency in regard to the working group's report. And that was good. And I think that if we're going to delete this last section in that paragraph, something, I think that reference, it is important that the report is referenced in this paragraph to maintain the sort of like, drive of the paragraph. It feels pretty important. And I also, unrelated to housing, you might be happy to hear, I'm going to talk about a different section of the plan for a second.
Love it.
Yeah, in reading the land use section and thinking about maintaining the rural scenic character, there are provisions to maintain buffers on roadways, and I don't know, driving around town, you can actually see a lot of development across the water or whatever. It's not just roadways that affect our view shed here. And I think that we could really stand to increase setbacks from the ocean in town. The 75-foot setback, once construction happens, inadequately buffers the view effects of new development in town. I think that if we want to maintain the scenic character of town, we need to increase the ocean development setbacks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the place to really grapple with that is with the planning board and codes. I don't think we're going to gain a whole lot by trying to wrestle that into the comprehensive plan. So that would be my comment. Any other comments? Who's next?
Connie Soifer. I live in the suburbs of Cuddy's Harbor.
Okay.
And I'm new to this whole process, but you mentioned that the executive summary refers to the report, but when I look at it, all the language about it is cut out. And I understand that's something that people have been working on as a controversial topic to gather. But to me, just saying this exists and you can find it somewhere, instead of articulating what that group, which worked very hard, recommended, it isn't accepting it, it's just stating it. And I feel that that's an error.
Well, all I can do is have the task force, we'll take a look at it. We're going to meet probably at least one more time before everything happens, so that we can make sure that we're all in agreement, whether it is added back in or goes out. But that decision was not made lightly. For example, housing is a hot button issue right now, not only here, but all over the state, all over the country, literally. But the only report that's really cited more than once is the housing report, even now, after taking out a number of different references to it. Mitchellfield Master Plan is not mentioned, Open Space Master Plan is not mentioned, you know. So I think we're trying to present a balanced look at the issues in the town without necessarily saying this is more important than the other. As I said before, all of these issues, in my opinion, are important to the town going forward in the future. And I think we have to, at least I've tried to keep that in mind as we put this thing together. So, but I appreciate your comments. We'll take it back and chew on it for again. But I will tell you our time frame. We want to try to get a smooth copy done as soon as possible so that we can get it printed and in front of the town for a review during the 2 months prior to this has to be voted on in November. That's the goal. So. Next. Well, I think the satisfaction meter appears to be fairly high. I'm really happy to hear that. It's going to make my day much more pleasant. Seriously, if anybody has any questions that they don't want to bring up today for whatever reason, or they want to bring it up in terms of an email or something like that, my email, I'll give you my email. Okay, if you come up to me individually, I'll give you the email, and you can communicate with me. I can communicate it to the task force, or you can communicate it to the town planner. That may be a better way to do it. At her email address in the town office, Margaret McIntyre, who's sitting right over here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Janice Thompson, and I live on Harpswell Neck. And before I ask my question, I just wanted to make sure that people understand that this is a question from Janice as a resident of Harpswell and not as a staff person at the Harpswell Anchor. I have to be very careful about that. Anyway, I guess my question is, you know, I keep hearing the reference to the affordable housing report or not, or is it an endorsement or not? I guess my question is, what has been the process of your committee to sort of figure that out? Because I think you guys have done a great job going out to the community and getting people's feedback, and that's fabulous. But until we vote, we don't really know how many people in Harpswell like that or don't like that. So it sounds like each meeting it sort of goes one way or goes the other way, and then the report gets changed because of that. So how do we know as a community what the majority really wants until we vote on it? I mean, I think that's a really hard thing for you guys to have been tackling, because there's some loud voices on one side and loud voices on the other. So I guess my question is, and I'm not telling you how I believe one way or the other, because that's not my role. I'll vote as everybody else votes. So my question is just an objective one. Just if you can go through like what your process has been and how you deal with that kind of feedback one way or the other.
Okay,
Thank
well, let
you.
me talk generally about the process, and if you want to talk specifically about the Affordable Housing Working Group report, I can do that as well. Generally, about a year or so ago, after the last major document was put forward, the 2024 draft, as that was being put together, we got feedback from the town at another public hearing that led us to believe that we had more work to do. There were some discussion that indicated that there might be some shortfalls. So we went back and we looked at each chapter as a committee, reviewed the chapter, discussed it at our task force meetings, then voted as a task force whether people were satisfied with the changes that were made. This was done for every chapter in the report or the plan. Almost every time the vote was unanimous. There were a couple of occasions when that was not true. Housing was a split vote. I think the vote was 6-3 at the time. Land use, I think, was also a split vote, reflecting the fact that these were issues that we still had to wrestle with. Now, as far as the Affordable Housing Working Group, there were a couple things that drove us to working this very, very carefully and very closely. One was the select board that put the Affordable Housing Working Group together, and in fact the task force, directed the Affordable Housing Working Group to work with the comp plan folks to determine the best way to represent their thoughts in the plan. And so we've had a closer than average, if you will, relationship with that committee, or now it's the housing committee, with that group, than say some of the other committees and groups in town. Some of the major changes that we've made in the last several months, in fact, one that directly involved housing, we ran through the housing committee and got their vote of approval. I think also when you consider, I think before we made our last edits, the Affordable Housing Working Group report was referenced in maybe 5 or 6 places in the report. Now it only appears in 2 or 3. So we tried to balance what we were doing in the report, and not necessarily going overboard in every other chapter or whatever, talking about the Affordable Housing Working Group. Some people came to me and said, is housing the only issue in this town? What's going on here? Why do you keep referencing this thing? Why do you keep referencing? Well, no, it isn't. That's why every time I've stood up in front of people, I've said, you got to look at the whole report, not just one particular issue or one particular reference in one particular chapter. Anybody else want to chime in?
I think we had a confluence of two really interesting and sometimes opposing priorities as we began this plan. I actually suggested when I joined the planning board 4 years ago that we start a comprehensive plan, and it just so happened that we got funding from FEMA to do it. We spent $90,000 on this plan. but we, at the same time, we were looking at housing, and we started to do the comp plan. And there were three major issues. And I stood at the recycling center with Al, with Brian, and some others, and they were talking to people as they were leaving and handing out flyers for our first visioning statement. And there were three major issues. One was housing. The other was really maintaining rural character. Almost every single person that I spoke with said Harpswell's growing too fast. And the other was protecting groundwater. So those were our three major issues. When we first started this, I suggested, and Brian actually worked on this with me and Mary Ann Nave, I suggested that we start an inventory of wells in Harpswell, and that we ask voluntarily for everybody to give us information about their wells, so we could start to build a database on wells and water quality. Well, the consultant didn't really like that idea. She said it wasn't part of her work program, and the rest of the task force chose not to proceed with it. So I thought it was a good idea, I still do, but that got shot down. So we never had a special committee that was actually working on potable water. And then rural character, that just kind of, there was no special committee working on rural character either. So the housing task, or the housing committee, really was the only select board appointed committee that fed into the comp plan. And they did a good job. I don't want to, they took their job seriously, but not everybody agreed with some of the recommendations that they made. The housing report contained it didn't contain some, it contained the most specific zoning ordinance changes of any place in the comprehensive plan. And some of those zoning ordinance changes could have had a serious impact on the way that the rural character of the community looked. There are people that disagree with my saying that. There are people that really do agree with my saying that. But that was where the nexus really came. So we've tried to balance potable water, water quality, commercial fishing also is a really important thing. There was never any, we got two fishermen on the task force, which really helped us a lot. But there was, there were a lot of different reports that the town could have incorporated and paid special attention to that didn't get the attention that housing did. So it became one big balance, and that's, as Al has said, that's what a comprehensive plan has to do. As we move forward now, we will continue to address housing. We will continue to address potable water. In fact, I think the town is going to get asked to spend money on doing further research on where our water comes from and how secure it is. So we have a lot more work to do, but we have done the best we can, and we've tried to listen to everybody. And as Al has said, it's not a perfect piece, and we have lots more work to do. So I hope I haven't been too wordy, but Al's reaching for the microphone. So.
Amy will be happy to hear. I had an email from Mary Ann Nave, who was the chair of the Conservation Commission, and I think they're about to embark on a application for a grant to look specifically at water in Harpswell. Now, that hasn't happened for, I think, since 2011 or something like that. 2008? Okay, so it's certainly a worthwhile effort, long overdue. It's one of the burning questions. How much water do we really have, especially now when we're in the middle of a moderate, what they call a moderate drought. So that's a good thing. But that process is underway, and I'm not exactly sure when the grant is going to be finalized and how soon this is all going to happen, but it's on the horizon. The other thing to keep in mind is that with respect to some of the ordinance changes that were suggested or recommended in the Affordable Housing Working Group, those ultimately have to be vetted by the planning board. They have to be vetted by the planning board, and any ordinance change has to be voted on by the town. So it's not like somebody can say, well, we ought to have a 5,000 square foot lot size. It just doesn't happen automatically. It has to go to the planning board. They have to wrestle with it, decide if they want to bring it forward to the select board and the town for a vote. So there are safeguards procedurally in place so that if you come across something and say, that doesn't make sense, I don't agree with that. Virtually every one of these areas that require further analysis or funding, anything like that, is ultimately going to have to come to the town. Select board, I think, can approve funding up to a certain amount, but large numbers, they're going to have to come to the town for a vote. So, again, keep that in mind. The process has been fairly rigorous, and Amy's right. I think the Affordable Housing Working Group and the Comprehensive Plan were sort of working side by side at the same time. The other reports that are mentioned in the comp plan, some of them were done 13, 14, 15 years ago. And they've remained intact. There's been a lot of action and activity and progress made in some of these areas. So these didn't have the immediacy that the Affordable Housing Working Group report had. But again, the whole thing is not giving people the feeling that that is the one and only item to focus on in this town. It's important. We all agree with that. But so is water. So is marine economy. So is rural character. So is natural resource. Transportation is important. And all of the other areas that we've addressed are important areas. So, yes.
Jim Lochran, I live on the Neck. You guys, amazing. How long have you been doing this? 4 years now?
4 years in November.
This is your new career, apparently. You can put this on your resume.
It doesn't yet. It pays not too great. So.
Well, and I feel badly for you. I greatly appreciate your energy and your work and your opposing points of view and so forth. I feel somewhat badly because I think you've been whiplashed by public knee-jerk reactions to a lot of things. Here on your paper you handed out today, paragraph 3, here's what was deleted. Red line, Housing for Harpswell sets out a series of proposals to increase the opportunities for expanding the supply of attainable housing that's consistent with the scale and character of Harpswell. The proposals address the use of existing housing as well as proposals to facilitate the construction of smaller single-family homes, duplexes, and townhouses should certain conditions be met, such as adequate water, septic, and vegetative buffering. All right, that was thrown out. Okay. Now, policy. Increasing opportunities for the construction of new attainable housing may require creative changes to the town's land use regulations. The intent is to facilitate the construction of single-family homes, duplexes, or two-family homes and townhouses. You're playing a shell game. What's the difference there? You're satisfying some block of whiners by redlining this particular paragraph and then saying, well, how can we say almost exactly the same thing in slightly different words and move it somewhere else? It just doesn't seem to hold water. On the water element, speaking of water, the Affordable Housing Working Group was in contact with the state's #1 hydrogeologist. We consulted with him, as I believe someone from the office came here and did a presentation. we know what the water situation is, and that is under the current technology, we're never going to know what the water situation is. And because of the bedrock aquifer we're on, what happens over there on the neck is going to have absolutely no effect on anything on Orr's Island or Cundy's Arm or anywhere else, and it's likely not going to have any effect on anything 100 yards away. So we've got a lot of foolishness going on. It's like we don't want to watch the science, we want to see what everyone's saying, and there's a lot of, oh, the sky is falling here. 500 houses, according to your other handout today, have been built in town in the last 10 years. I'm not sure what it said, I think it's 10 years. We have housing developments off Peabody Road, right? New housing development. There's new houses all around town. Now, how many of those people had to, before they could get their building permits, how many of those people had to supply a well sample test? I don't think we require that at all. And if it's never been required, now suddenly if we want to do something that's affordable housing, we're going to require them to be held to a higher standard than the general public is held to. That doesn't seem right. So those are just a couple of comments. I think that you would perhaps do well to reintegrate some of the wording and keep it a little cleaner as a document. You know, you can say whatever, yes, recommendations. Recommendations are recommendations, as you said, Alan. You know, nothing in this report is going to become law when the town passes it or doesn't pass it. And I think people have to realize that. And what you've got is, when you're approaching the housing situation, it seems like you've got to get it just right so that everyone on your panel can't say anything negative. Well, that's designing by committee, and we know what happens when you design by committee. So I would say, you know, again, you guys are doing tremendous work, and maybe you're doing too much of it. You know, maybe, remember that the Affordable Housing Working Group was appointed by the Select Board with very specific things because that's what they wanted to see, and that's what they got. And now to say, oh, well, that's not really the case, or, well, no, we can't pay attention to those recommendations, is disingenuous at worst, but it's like ignoring what the Select Board said they wanted in the first place. So I just think that you got a lot of knees and elbows in this thing. And it would be nice if you could smooth some of that out. And I'm interested in a lot of the other stuff in the comprehensive plan. And you have pointed out repeatedly that the comprehensive plan isn't about water and housing. It's about a whole panoply of items that are important to town and hopefully will be paid attention to or will grow in importance to town, et cetera, et cetera. And yet here we are. I don't know which public meeting this is for you guys, 27, 36, I don't know. Here we are, and what are we talking about? Housing and water.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Because I think it just, if you would just address it head on without couching everything to keep the naysayers happy, just address it. We have an affordable housing problem in this town. You know, you can have all the rural character you want, but once the locals can't afford to live there anymore, what you're going to have is you're going to have a big playground for people with a lot of money. And that's the direction that this town is going in right now. And I think the fishermen can certainly attest to that. I think the old hands like me, old hands that I was an old hand somewhere else and came here. I'm one of the problem people. But the point is, when I talk to people about housing, no one says, oh, there's too much growth. I've never heard them say that. Because everyone's smart enough to know that the population is 5,000 people now, and it was 5,000 people 10 years ago. There isn't any growth. There is no out of control growth. All right? What's out of control are the prices. When I talk to people, they say, oh, did you hear about so-and-so? It's a little 2-bedroom joint down on the road. Yeah, that just sold for $850,000. I remember when they put that up for 25 grand. That's what people are complaining about, are the prices. They're not complaining about uncontrollable growth. If you want to talk about uncontrollable growth, show it. Where is it? Where's the uncontrollable growth? And I would posit that there is none. And so we need to direct some growth to housing for the people who make this town what it is and who will keep this town what it is. You know, as the mayor of Paris, France, has a huge affordable housing program. I mean, it's unbelievable. They take old ministry buildings and reconvert them to housing, and people pay, you know, next to nothing by local standards and have great views of the Eiffel Tower, whatever. But her position is simply that the people who make this city the city it is deserve to be able to live here. The bakers and the restaurateurs and the shop owners and so forth. And I think that's what we've got to reorient ourselves to. The people who make this town what it is, the fishermen and the firemen and the school teachers, and God knows we're the oldest place in the oldest place, the caregivers. Where are our caregivers going to live? That's what we were focused on in the working committee. So I would just bring those points out and hope that you consider them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, we're going to take the inputs that we get today and thrash them around again. I think you have a valid point about wording. We're going to we'll make that as consistent as we possibly can, and do the best we can with the other comments that you made.
My name is Dorian Taylor. I think I was in front of you guys before things. Where's Island? I think I might be able to possibly help a lot of people understand exactly where you're coming from. And I think it's very difficult when they see a plan, not understanding that the plan's connected to an allotment of money that's been available. And in order for us to get to the money, we actually have to have a plan established, which then gets us into the line for a portion of the money that's available to us. This is not a set in stone document. A lot of people do understand that. It's a living document. It's a start to get a foot in the door to get access to the money that we need to actually help our town. It's Harpswell's in a very interesting situation. You have three things going on here. You're an island. That's difficult in itself. You have a large vacationing community, and you have a fishing community. And all three are at odds with each other all the time. They all have their own concerns, their own goals, their own separate things. I understand housing, you guys did a fantastic job. I actually went through that thing looking for any which way I could possibly turn that thing, and you came up with a lot of good ideas. But I agree it should not be included in the initial plan, but should be a location where you can find it. That way you simplify it for the people reading it at the state level. Because the state officials aren't going to be sitting there with complicated documents. They're going to want to see something very simple, to the point, and generalized, because they deal with a lot of different communities. And then they're going to rely on that community to make it more detailed later, once it gets accepted. But by doing what you do, once you have access to the money, then you can start detailing it down, and then that money comes in. Harpswell's in another unique position. You guys are actually eligible for a lot of federal grants, a lot of them, for your roads, for your shoreline, for your businesses, for your housing. I don't think a lot of you realize how many grants are actually available to you, being the situation you're in. I now work for the bridge program for the state, and I know in 3 years there is funding for sidewalks, there's funding for bike paths, there's funding for a number of things that is available. It takes years to get a process, but you have to start the process. My wife, who works also for the state for permitting, knows there's a lot of stuff also available for grants. And I believe one of them you just mentioned was something that she mentioned to someone she works with, and they looked into it. So it's they're out there. Again, I applaud you guys for what you do. I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to get access. This is a living document to get access to the money we need to make the changes. And it's all connected. We need the shoreline, we need the housing, we need the water. None of it's on an individual basis. Unfortunately, certain things take higher priority than others for gaining more access to the money. That's just the way the government works. So you do have to be very detailed what you present to them to make sure you get the maximum amount of funding you can possibly get, is what you want to do. Which is where I believe you guys are actually trying to do for us, is put a document in that gets us the maximum amount of funding we need to get the stuff we need done. Am I correct on that one?
It's one of the motives for sure.
Yes. So, and I know this because I do reviews of this stuff. I've done shoreline work over the years. I've helped towns get themselves situated out of situations. So I've seen the inner workings of government, the outer workings of government. I've been on both sides of the table. So outside of saying you've done a great job up to this point, I think the document at this point covers what you needed to cover, moving forward to what you need to get. But keep in mind, everyone, this isn't a permanent document. The rest of it's going to come from, once it's been approved, the rest of it comes from the town for us to make our decisions at that point, to streamline it and get addressed what we feel we need to get addressed. So this is like step one in multiple steps that have to be done. But we need to do this step to get started. Thank you.
Thank you. You've reminded me of something I should have said earlier. A big part of the success of this plan is going to be the establishment of an implementation committee, committee charged with monitoring progress in these various areas, a committee that would be responsible for reaching out to other committees in the town and keeping the select board advised, routinely, or periodically, I should say, on these particular issues. The thing that would have this thing go down in flames pretty quickly is if we just put it on a shelf and forgot about it and said, okay, we did our job, thank you very much. Well, the work actually begins after this document hopefully will be approved by the state, because that's when people are going to have to dig down and say, okay, how do we get this accomplished? How do we get the funds necessary to do that in certain cases? What do we do? Much like what the Conservation Commission's trying to do with funding for a water study here. So, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my name is Karen Chan. I also live on North Island. I think I'm responding to something that Amy just said. Sorry, can you? Okay, I'm eating the microphone here. And that is that one of the reasons to minimize references to this attainable housing report in the comprehensive plan is because other critical issues didn't have similar reports, investigation. To me, that's an odd thing that we would then take really good work, whether we agree with it or not, and basically minimize references. I don't see any references in that one section to that the task force. I see it in this paragraph 3 saying that it's available on the website, but I'm just looking at it carefully, but there seems to be at a minimum number of references, if hardly any, just one more second. And so I would use it as a model, as it seems to be doing on water, that other people, committees, whatever, task force get together and also focus on these additional issues and not try to, what feels to me, not be comprehensive or transparent about all the work that went into this one particular issue. I think our town is smart enough that we don't need to worry that there's going to be a perception that the only issue we care about is housing. We all know water is critical. We all know prices are critical. And if that's the reason we're not giving this what I consider some of the sunlight it needs, with commentary that there's controversy about this or whatever it is, but to just kind of exclude it, which is what feels like to me doesn't sound like sound decision-making or policy-making or giving our community the information it needs that exists. Once it gets into an appendix, people aren't going to look at it. Thank you.
thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with one more sort of like piece of information that I think is, indicative of why people are focused on housing. This is a bit of information. I don't have the exact numbers. I think Matt does, but there are 500 fewer children in town than there were 20 years ago. That's a staggering amount. It's 10% of the town. And I think that everybody, most people in town recognize that there's a lack of young people, and that's like, who are we doing this plan for, I suppose? If, partially the town, but also partially who will be the town if we are losing all of the youth. I'd be curious if Matt could share that particular, I don't remember where that's from, but.
It's around 500, I don't know the exact number.
Gotcha. All right. But I just wanted to chime in about why housing might feel super important, because young families can't afford to be here.
Well, certainly, housing would play a major role in upping that number, if you will. But there are also other factors, larger factors. Birth rate in this country, and literally over the entire world, has gone down. China is now, instead of controlling the number of children they have, they're encouraging people to have children. So again, it's not a single factor, if you will, but I agree. I think it is concerning that, for example, our one elementary school has had a decline in student population over the last 10 years or so. I think they may have bumped up a little bit this past year, but basically it's a declining population, and that is a concern, for sure. So I understand and appreciate your comment.
Catherine Gilly, Cundy's Harbor. Just a random quick aside or add into the whole affordable housing thing. The one thing that I continuously think about is somebody coming to me and telling me that I have to sell my home for a certain dollar amount because the economy has changed in the 30 years that I have resided in my home. So I think it is kind of alarming thinking about how we need to control the price and the affordability when in my head as a homeowner that goes to me and thinks, and I think, is somebody in 30 years going to tell me that I can't sell my home when this is one of the, if not the biggest asset in my entire life that I've ever had, and I rely on that astronomically and that growth to think, okay, in 30 years I can sell my home, I can move somewhere else that at that point is more affordable to me, and I can get the benefit of my home. I don't think it's, while I understand housing has an issue, there is that other side of it too. So I just think that that's something that people also need to consider.
Hi, Beth Pelkey. I live on Dottie Point. And my question for you is, I know affordable housing is a huge issue, but it's not just Harpswell, it's the entire state. Prices have risen. It's difficult for young people to get homes. But here's my question for you. If you do eventually get some affordable housing in here, how are you going to not discriminate against someone from out of town from buying it versus a local that you want to be in it? You're going to run into some lawsuits. It's something you really need to think about. It's kind of a big deal.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. The affordable housing issue is a real issue, and I don't have any, I don't want to pretend that it's not. I think that solving the affordable housing issue is going to take some creativity, and I will certainly commit to being part of that process. I want to just say, somebody mentioned how we had 5,000 people 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and we have 5,000 now. Number one, summer population increases or doubles that. But number two, 5,000 people 10, 20 years ago may have been housed in half the houses because you might have had 4 people per household. What we have now is 2 people per household. So we may have a population that doesn't seem like it's grown that much. It has grown, and the summer population has grown. But it's now housed in separate houses. So there are more houses and there's more traffic. It's important when you're going to talk numbers to know what those numbers are really saying. You can't just throw numbers around and expect that they all mean the same thing.
How are we doing, folks? Any other comments? I think this has been a valuable discussion. We're not quite at the finish line yet. Unfortunately, my task force members are probably grinding their teeth at my saying that. But there are some things that we need to take another look at to make sure we're doing the right thing. And by the time we come up with a smooth copy here in the next several weeks or so, we hope that we've addressed your concerns to the best of our ability. I think I think it's October 4th, actually. It's fairly late, but I would say, in order to be safe, move that up a few weeks because who knows, we might run into a hornet's nest or something and scramble around. We've timed this out so that we have provide plenty of time for the people to look at the product before it comes before a vote. And also to provide an opportunity for people to weigh in as appropriate. So I would say 30 to 40 days, 45 days before November would be the absolute cutoff that I would be looking at. Well, here's the thing. If the public hearing, if the changes are determined to be minor in nature, editorial, restructure a sentence or so on, we don't need another public hearing. If they are major changes, if they are determined to be major changes, then we are going to need another public hearing before we vote. So that's kind of the way this is played. By September 4th. All right, so we only have a few weeks, folks.
Can I ask one final question? In the report, you also, I noticed, encourage businesses. I think that was the wording, encouraging new businesses. I'm curious, if someone, as a business venture, wanted to build an apartment building for full-time rentals, how would you react to that? Would that be, oh no, that violates all of our housing laws, or yes, that's a business and it helps solve the housing shortage, or what would because we're balancing someone having a business opportunity versus putting up a house somewhere or a building somewhere or converting. As Amy pointed out, we have a lot of terrific old homes that are lived in by 1 or 2 people, and they could easily be converted into 3 or 4 unit apartment buildings. So I just wanted to kind of get your feeling on that.
Well, under the current ordinances, for example, if you have, let's say you want to build 3 units in a townhouse structure or something like that, that's considered now, under our bylaws, under our ordinances, a subdivision. And a subdivision, you need 80,000 square foot per unit, which means you need 240,000 square feet, unless it's workforce housing. If you have a 2-unit structure it's not a subdivision, you need 40,000 square feet per unit unless it's a workforce structure. So one of the reasons I think the Affordable Housing Working Group came up with some alternate approaches, if you will, to take advantage of larger houses, maybe house splitting, they call it, and so on, was they realized that under our current ordinances, it's really tough to build a lot of houses. That's why they had another recommendation to build smaller houses on smaller lots. But then you have to look and say, okay, how is that going to impact the property? Is it designed properly and so on? I am a firm believer personally that we can do a much better job in designing subdivisions even. We sort of take a huge chunk of land, we split it up into 80,000 square foot lots or whatever, put a road in the middle of it and a turnaround, and that's it. There's very little creativity. The developer wants to get maximum building out of his investment and so on. But that could also be split up, that land could also be split up into different types of houses. You could have the same number of people. Some of the houses could be on the smaller side, some of them could be larger side, like you'd see in most neighborhoods in the country. But we have not pressed that button enough, I don't think, because a lot of times the developer's holding a lot of the cards. So that's something I think for the town to look at in the future, the planning board and others to see if we can somehow engage in a more creative process to work the land without losing rural character, without all the other things that we value. So, yep.
One last thing. The state has just passed legislation that really will change the way land use decisions are made and changes the way affordable housing is treated in communities. So they've amended the number of lots that have to be created in order to be reviewed under the subdivision law from 3 to 5. So in Harpswell, under current ordinances, if you subdivide into 3 or more lots, you have to come under planning board review. The way that it's going to be now is you can subdivide 5 before you have to come under planning board review. So that is going to change. That's going to change what the planning board's jurisdiction is. The planning boards are also going to be prohibited from adding fire protection language to affordable housing projects, and also prohibited from requiring any more than one on-street or on-site parking for affordable housing. So things are really changing at the state level, and they're going to affect the way that Harpswell does its business, so be mindful.
Anything else? Again, I want to thank you very much for coming out on this beautiful day.